Good morning, and welcome to this online service of the Unitarian Universalist Church of Arlington. I'm Lisa Lerman, a member of the Board of Trustees. Whether you're a regular attendee or are joining us for the first time, we welcome you. You're welcome here no matter your identity, heritage, or immigration status, no matter whom you love, no matter your means or abilities. This morning, the service offers music and inspiration on the theme of deep listening to one another. As the pandemic rages and as our governmental crisis intensifies, I feel as if I got my fingers stuck in an electrical socket. I'm in a constant hyper-alert state. I calm myself by listening to the wind, the trees, the birds, and to the people I love. Just lately, I've spent a lot of time listening to my granddaughter, Shoshana, and I just can't resist showing you her face. At 3 months old, Shoshana has no words yet, but I can listen to her eyes, the curve of her mouth, the sounds she makes. When she's content and has my full attention, her face fills with joy. When she's in distress, she wants only for me to listen and figure out what's wrong. This work is tiring, intense, and magical. We all hunger to be seen and heard. But unlike adults, babies don't care if they seem vulnerable or needy. They have so much to teach us. We hope you'll join us after the service for our virtual coffee hour. The link is on our webpage and in the Connections newsletter. Please watch your email inbox and visit our Facebook page to stay connected with UUCA and to learn about all the wonderful opportunities to grow in our beloved community.
Since we're exploring deep listening, I thought I would invite you to listen to music today in a little bit of a different way. This piece by French composer Dacan used the musical sounds of nature, in this case, birds, and the cuckoo specifically, to write his piece of music that's based on a form called a rondo. In a rondo, you'll hear the main theme and in between a couple of different episodes. And so the main theme will return after those 2 episodes. You'll hear it. Also listen for this, the sound of the cuckoo. And sometimes you'll hear the rhythm, but not those 2 intervals that you're accustomed to hearing with the sound of the cuckoo.
Our call to worship this morning comes from Andre Moll. As we gather together, may we remember when you share with me what is most important to you. That is where listening begins. When I show you that I hear you, when I say your life matters, that is where compassion begins. When I open the door to greet you, that is where hospitality begins. When I venture out to bring you to shelter, that is where love begins. When I risk my comfort to ease your suffering, when I act against hatred, violence, and injustice, that is where courage begins. When we experience the full presence of each other, because of our shared humanity, because of our differences, that is where holy gratitude begins. May this space be a table that is not complete until all are welcome. May this table be a space of beauty where together we create a series of miracles and where all we share is sacred. Here, today, in this place and with these people, may we listen so that we can hear. May we hear so that we can feel. May we feel so that we can know. And may we know so that we can change ourselves and this world. May this chalice we light our way.
I am so pleased to be here today with Mary Hollingshead. Mary has been a member of UUCA for, we think, 6 or 7 years and is a resident at Goodwin House. And we are having a conversation today about National Coming Out Day, or kind of in the context of National Coming Out Day, but really about Mary's story and how that intersects and is different. So Mary, thank you so much for joining me this morning. I really appreciate it.
Well,
this Sunday, October 11th, is National Coming Out Day, and that's a holiday that started in 1988. A holiday, sort of an observance, maybe, honoring folks who have come out as LGBTQ, encouraging folks to come out. I think it has kind of dual purposes, and continuing kind of the gay rights movement, the sense of pride in the queer community. And so I wanted to talk with you about your experience of coming out, if that's how you would talk about, if you would say, yes, I've had a coming out experience, or kind of how that feels like it connects for you.
well, I guess I have to start by saying, when I was working, I was a high school English teacher,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't feel like an advice giver. So I don't know if I have any advice to give young people.
Mm-hmm.
I was married and left a marriage when I discovered that's what I needed to do.
Yeah.
I guess maybe that would be my advice, is do what you need to do.
Right.
Follow your heart.
Right. Right.
Because that's all I did. I lived with Edith. Well, we would have celebrated our 40th anniversary next month,
Mm-hmm.
but she died 2 years ago. So that has been a challenge for me. And it was why I wanted to move to Goodwin House,
Mm-hmm.
because I figured, okay, one of us is going to go before the other.
Mm-hmm.
And that will be hard.
You wanted
But
that.
I've certainly gotten a lot of support from people like Barb, who have kept me going.
Yes. Yeah. You know, it must have, I am imagining your experience of doing what you needed to do, right? Of leaving your marriage and realizing that you needed to live authentically, maybe would be a way to describe it, or you needed to kind of follow your own heart. I imagine that was not easy, and perhaps at the time, you know, I think about our young people now, particularly children and youth who were raised in maybe in a community like UUCA, who I hope know that they are loved and cherished and celebrated no matter who they love. And that is not the case in every community. So I wonder if there's any reflection you have or remembrance about what that time was like for you.
Yes, I remember thinking how lucky I was to have the friends I did, who all seemed to be in sympathy with what I was doing at any time. And I thought, well, you know, I don't think this is probably that usual, but I never felt adrift as far as getting support from other people.
Oh, that's wonderful.
I was lucky.
Mm-hmm.
And the people I had the wisdom to have around me as friends were all, you know, splendid. So that worked.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. When we spoke earlier about this conversation, you shared that you had not heard of National Coming Out Day, that sort of observance wasn't part of your understanding. Is that?
Yeah, I don't feel like I'm part of a movement.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I am just myself.
Right.
And
you're just living your life.
I have done what I needed to do, and and I have been very, very lucky. I was very fortunate. I think I said Edith was was reluctant to be identified as part of a couple, and she would be really scared, I think now. Yeah. She was in government jobs where she had top secret clearances, and that just hung on her. She hadn't been in government for years, but she was reluctant to be identified.
Yeah.
as anything but mainstream.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I was very, very lucky to have someone who was so loving, and there are many people who never have had that. And so, yeah.
That's
I've
true.
been lucky.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Right. There's sort of, it occurs to me that there's both sort of this almost political piece, right? And in some ways, Edith's story kind of, you know, of not, of feeling scared, of not feeling comfortable, not feeling that she was able to be open because maybe of her past history with the government, and sort of having that, you know, that relates kind of politically in some ways with National Coming Out Day, which encourages and tries to support folks as they come out, while acknowledging not everybody, it does feel safe to be able to do that for any number of reasons.
Yeah.
And that maybe is sort of the political piece. And then your story has so much that's simply just, you did what your heart needed to do, and you were lucky to have friends who supported you, and you were lucky to have this great love in your life. And that's not political at all. There's, you know, that is just the very personal story any of us would hope to have, really, Mary, right? Like that,
right.
That's the dream.
Yeah, I've had it.
I am so grateful for Mary sharing part of her story with us this morning. Listening to each other is an important piece of what we do in community, and I am always so glad to hear stories from others. I particularly love hearing from people of other generations who share similar identities to me. Learning from elders and from teens and children about their experiences with coming out continues to be important to me in my identity as a queer person. It's true that we are better when we are in community, but it is also true that we need one another to survive. Here at UUCA, we celebrate whoever you are, whomever you love, and whoever you are becoming. Whether this is your first time marking National Coming Out Day as someone who is out and proud, or your first time ever hearing about it, or maybe your first time thinking you may want to come out, we are here with you. To help sustain this vibrant, supportive, and proud community, you can mail a check payable to UUCA with the word offering or pledge in the memo line. You can give online at the church website, uucava.org. Just click on the donate button on the top of the page. Or you can donate by text. You can donate by using the mobile app Give Plus. Just enter the zip code 22204 and choose our church, UUCA, and follow the prompt to give now.
You with the sad eyes, don't be discouraged. Oh, I realize it's hard to take courage in a world full of people. You can lose sight of it all, and the darkness there inside you makes you feel so small. But I see your true colors shining through. I see your true colors, and that's why I love you. So don't be afraid to let them show your True colors are beautiful like a rainbow. Can't remember when I last saw you laughing. If this world makes you crazy and you've taken all you can bear, just call me up, because you know I'll be there.
I had a conversation recently with someone who had not received the response they wanted to a request and were feeling upset. This conversation, I should say, was in no way related to this congregation, to UUCA, so you can go ahead and stop wondering if it's you I'm talking about. There was a fact there. This person didn't get what they wanted. And someone who was providing some mediation for the conversation asked, I know you didn't get what you wanted. I know that this person with authority said no to you. But did you feel listened to? Did you feel listened to? Before we go any further with this sermon and this service on our theme of deep listening, I want to say a word about that word, listening. As you may know, our themes come from Soul Matters, a consortium of 150, 200 Unitarian Universalist congregations all across the country. There's kind of a cool process to choose themes. In the spring, the congregations can submit ideas, and then a giant Google form goes out, a survey where congregations can rank all the different possible themes for each month. And then whoever is tasked with this, I think, somewhat unenviable task of taking the input and massaging it and placing it ends up creating this list of themes for the year. One of the things I really like about being part of a consortium is that it means I can ask colleagues from other parts of the country how they're approaching this theme. And the same is true for our covenant group facilitators or for our religious education folks. And it also means that because we didn't choose the themes ourselves, the themes may inspire us or push us as a congregation to explore ideas or language that we wouldn't otherwise engage in. This year, as I went through the list of chosen themes, I paused at the theme for October, deep listening. I had what I would call an ouch moment. Do you know what an ouch moment is? It's when you hear a word or a phrase, someone says something, and your response is, oh, ouch. Oh, that feels like it hurts, or it might hurt someone else. Listening as sort of a conceptual framework, not as the literal auditory fact of listening, can be experienced by some as ableist language. It conflates the idea of taking in information with listening as though that's the only way we can take in information, whereas in fact, people can take in information and seek to understand and connect in many different ways. So I reached out to those colleagues that I like to reach out to ask how they were dealing with deep listening. What kinds of words were they using to expand on the theme? And I do want to share some of their beautiful responses. Accompaniment, they said. Presence, attention, witnessing. Some said understanding, but I think there are times when we seek to understand, when we listen deeply or read deeply or receive a story deeply, and we still don't really understand it. So that didn't feel quite right. My younger daughter's RE class here at UUCA, which actually happened here in my house, in my dining room over Zoom last week, her class was exploring the theme of deep listening. The teacher had a wonder box and pulled out of it something to help us listen and held it up to her head. And I could hear, as I was working in the kitchen in the next room, I could hear the children shouting out, "That's not an ear! That's not an ear!" It was a heart the teacher pulled out of the wonder box, a heart to help us listen. There was then a very cool activity involving taking your heart rate and doing jumping jacks and taking your heart rate and running in place. It's incredible what our RE teachers are doing over Zoom these days. But it stuck with me, the idea of listening with one's heart. Later in our service this morning, our interim music director, Sophia, will invite us into a piece of music using a quote from Khalil Gibran. "O music, in your depths we deposit our hearts and souls. Thou hast taught us to see with our ears and hear with our hearts." So I want to acknowledge both the ableism that can be experienced in the call for us to all engage in deep listening, and also to invite us into an understanding of listening with our hearts. of being deeply present or paying close attention. Because actually, no matter what our auditory capacity, no matter whether we listen to stories or read them or receive them, the hard part is the heart listening. Author and blogger Heather Plett wrote a piece recently about talking with her 3 daughters, about listening to her 3 daughters, or trying to. There are a surprising number of things, she wrote, that get in the way of good listening. Sometimes there are too many distractions. Sometimes I'm tired. Sometimes they've hurt my feelings and I'm resentful. And sometimes I just want them to be more like me so I don't have to work so hard to figure them out. Well, that's fair. It's easier to understand people, to grok them when they are like us, share our experiences or our identities, or best yet, our opinions. Perhaps it's even easier to pay attention, to be present. Seeking to understand, to listen with heart across difference is difficult. In the piece by Heather Plett, she quotes Otto Scharmer and Katrine Koffer in Leading from the Emerging Future. Scharmer and Koffer talk about 4 levels of listening. Downloading. The listener hears ideas, and these merely reconfirm what the listener already knows. Factual listening. The listener tries to listen to the facts, even if those facts contradict their own theories or ideas. Empathic listening. The listener is willing to see reality from the perspective of the other and sense the other's circumstances. Generative listening. Spoiler alert, this is the good one. The listener forms a space of deep attention that allows an emerging future to land or manifest. Generative listening. The listening that births something new in the telling and the receiving of a story. So how do we do this? Whether it's with our daughters, as for Plett, or with someone with whom we are in conflict. Of course, that could be our daughters, as my life demonstrates, or with someone we have only just met, who perhaps has had experiences different than our own. I wonder if you have ever had the experience of talking with a person who speaks quietly but clearly and compellingly. I don't mean someone who's literally difficult to be heard or understood, but rather someone who speaks with that kind of quiet centeredness. You can almost feel a room lean in to hear that person, to catch every word. To listen generatively, we have to center ourselves down, to ground ourselves, to be able to be fully present to the conversation and the invitation being offered. That is surely the way to begin to quiet our own thoughts, allowing ourselves to be open. In Christian theology, the concept of kenosis means a self-emptying, a letting go of self so as to be more present to the divine or to others. That concept is present also in Buddhism, the idea of letting go or setting aside of self. Or in the concept of surrender in Islam, surrendering of self to the divine presence. Sounds like a lot of work, you may be thinking, and I am too. Why would we self-empty and surrender and be present? I believe, ironically, that self-emptying we do is what allows our own transformation through relationship. I think sometimes about the concept of relationality out of my community organizing work. I was trained in community organizing through the Industrial Areas Foundation, which is the parent foundation to Voice here in Northern Virginia and to the Washington Interfaith Network in DC. Founded by Saul Alinsky in Chicago, in the industrial area of Chicago. That's why they have that funny name. The Industrial Areas Foundation tells us that the most radical act any of us can do is the relational meeting. The one-on-one conversation in which I learn your story and you learn mine. So often we stay in our own bubbles. Community organizing asks us to create public relationships. That doesn't mean we can't like each other privately too and enjoy hanging out. It means that the relationship is for an end, outside itself. That the relationship is our building block for creating the world as it should be and not just as it is now. That radical act, the relational meeting, is the groundwork of all community organizing. An organization like Voice, it can't tell you what its issues are from year to year because its issues aren't decided at the beginning. Rather, they bubble up from the stories, from people in the neighborhoods, people in the churches and the mosques and the synagogues and the community organizations, from what they care. In the relational meeting, we seek to tell our stories, not just the facts of who we are, but how our lives have been shaped. Where does your passion come from? What makes you angry? What gives you hope? Sometimes I will have a relational meeting and not do anything with that person for months, but then the right connection will emerge and I will have learned enough. These are the really good ones, not every time. I will have learned enough about that person to know that they are the right person for this moment. The relational meeting depends not just on listening, but on sharing our stories as well. Being willing to be vulnerable with how we have been shaped and what we most long for. And that can be hard. We have to intentionally build the skills, especially, I think, in an environment like the DC area, where so often the first question we ask each other is, so, what do you do? I like to ask, in addition to what's your favorite flavor of ice cream and what's the very first concert you went to, both great icebreaker questions, what do you love? What do you wish for? How do you like to spend your time? Who matters most to you? There are specific ways to build the skills of listening, of relationality. Years ago, I took a training in nonviolent communication, or sometimes called compassionate communication. NVC, nonviolent communication, uses specific techniques for interpersonal connection based on the idea that all of us share some core needs to be heard and understood, and that by building our skills and capacity, we can come to build connection even across conflict or difference. I found that training to be powerful and practically useful in many ways. And I have found it helpful since to add in some of the layers, the important acknowledgments about power structures and social location, sometimes missing from trainings that focus only on a human-to-human connection. The truth is, we don't all show up in a space in the same way. We haven't all been listened to the same way in our lives. Some of us have found our voices are welcome in many spaces. Some of us have found our voices are not. I show up with all of my identities, and to be really able to be present to my story, I need you to acknowledge and learn about me. Just a little, as I need to do the same for you. Sometimes that means acknowledging that how I experience something might be quite different than how you experience it. In anti-oppression work, we often talk about intent versus impact. When we say something in one way, trying to convey something, but it is experienced differently, our intent matters, but the impact matters too. When someone has that ouch moment that we talked about earlier, that matters. Whether I meant to cause an ouch or not, I want to listen, to learn, to do better next time. I am so appreciative of Mary Hollingshead and of Laura Solomon for helping us this morning to acknowledge and honor Coming Out Day. It's a day that I think fundamentally is about listening, heart listening to what is true within us, and heart listening to each other and our stories. One of the things that has been so impactful for me in my community organizing work is the work of the marriage equality movement all across this country. The success specifically of storytelling in that movement, of people sharing their stories with each other, stories of their own need for marriage equality, of what it would mean for them, for their partner, for health insurance, for their children's safety, or even sharing stories of their loved ones and what it would mean for them. That movement moved forward in part because of the power of stories and the openness to listen to those stories. And so I have been thinking about what stories we should be listening to now, you and I and any of us in this congregation. I've been grateful in recent weeks to the UUCA People with Disabilities group, who have been seeking to grow awareness of people with disabilities and of universal design and accessibility within our community. Next week, I'll be joined by Reverend Walter and Laura, and the three of us will have a dialogue about some national work happening in the Unitarian Universalist Association, the Commission on Institutional Change, whose report, Widening the Circle, love that name, Widening the Circle, invites us to think about how white supremacy culture and racism exists in the water we swim in and in our institutions and congregation. I'm looking forward to that conversation next week, to thinking about what it calls for us at UUCA to do, what stories we corporately need to be telling and listening for, as well as what it calls for us in the greater Unitarian Universalist movement to do. The flip side, of course, to making sure that those of us who need to develop listening skills develop them, and that is probably all of us. The flip side is making sure that there is nurturing or systemic support and systemic change to share stories that have not been shared before, that haven't been heard fully in the system. It's like the move forward, move back rule in meetings. If you tend to talk a lot, move back a little. That's usually me. If you usually don't speak, challenge yourself to move forward. And design a system, facilitate a meeting so that many people can move forward and back as needed, so that we can all listen and tell our stories more fully. That's really at its center the core of the work from the Commission on Institutional Change, decentering those who have historically held power in our institutions so we can bring into the center those who have historically been marginalized, so that ultimately we might create a new center that can truly hold all. Because remember why we do the listening: to be transformed. Every story I take in comes into my heart and changes it a little bit if I let it. The ones that are difficult for me to hear, the ones that convict me, the ones that remind me of my own story. That's true for us individually and as a broader community. Congregationally, I hope that we at UUCA will build our capacity to be relational, which is already present among us, to deeply accompany each other. Maybe starting meetings with check-ins or get-to-know-you questions, as so many already do. Especially important on Zoom, where it can be easy to just get down to business and avoid the relationality that often happens around the edges of meetings in real life. Beginning with our stories, with listening, especially when we feel conflict, but really at any time. Building up institutionally the number of people to whom we have listened deeply, each of us and corporately. And getting quiet to be able to do that. And what about with our daughters, as Plet shared at the beginning of our sermon? Or with our spouses or our roommates or our parents? Sometimes I think it is even harder to connect with those folks than with the person from another country speaking another language of another gender. Sometimes the person with whom we spend every day sharing a dining room table or a phone call or an office is the hardest story to listen to, because we have already supplied the script in our own head for what the story will be. Get quiet. Listen. You may not have received what you want, the mediator said, but did you feel listened to? A family, a congregation, a community, we're never all going to agree. We're never all going to get exactly what we want. But we can, perhaps, feel that we have been listened to, heart listened, and we can, perhaps, learn to listen. I invite you now to get quiet, to join me in a spirit of prayer or meditation. If you are moved to share a part of your story or to share what is in your heart today in the chat, please do so. You are also, as always, invited to reach out to uucapastoralcare@gmail.com if you'd like to connect further. Spirit of life, help me to center down. Help me to learn the stories I don't yet know. To listen, to watch, to pay attention. Help me to tell the stories I hold. Give me those who will listen with an open heart. Spirit of life, be present in the stories we share with each other and in the spaces in between. Spirit of life, be present in our very breath.
Breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, breathe out. When I breathe in, I breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I breathe out love. When I breathe in, I breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I breathe out love.
Gibran has said, "O music, in your depths we deposit our heart and soul. Thou hast taught us to see with our ears and to hear with our hearts." As we breathe in and breathe out, I invite you to take this music into your breath, into the ears of your heart, into the eyes of your ears, and listen to see what this music is teaching you, is showing you about what you take in, what you breathe in, and hold your breath at the top. Be filled with your breath. And then gently release. And hold at the end of your exhalation. Feel the emptiness. Breathing in. Taking in what it is that you're seeing today. Breathing out. What are you letting go of? What are you releasing today? Breathing in, breathing out. What are the ears of your soul? What are they hearing today? Breathe in, breathe out. Let the music breathe for you. Breathe in. Take in what you need. Breathe out. Let go. Release.
To see with our ears and to hear with our hearts. When we do this, when we listen and accompany and are present with our full selves, then we truly breathe out love to the world. May it be so for you and for us all. Amen.